Ambassador Elora Voss tried not to fidget as the massive doors to the Galactic Concorde's central chamber slid open. This was humanity's first official representation at an interstellar diplomatic function, and the weight of her species' future pressed down on her shoulders like a gravitational anomaly. "Remember," whispered her aide, Darian Reed, "we're just observers. The Concorde invited us as a courtesy after we helped with the Proxima Centauri shipping dispute." Elora nodded slightly, maintaining the neutral expression she'd practiced for months. The chamber was magnificent, a vast spherical space with hovering platforms arranged in concentric rings. Each platform hosted representatives from different species, some vaguely humanoid, others utterly alien in form. At the center floated the Arbitration Council, 5 ancient species who had founded the Concorde millennia ago. Their current task: preventing war between the aggressive Rexian Empire and the resource-rich Turalian collective. An usher, a hovering, translucent being resembling a jellyfish, guided them to a small observer platform near the outermost ring. "The human delegation may take its appointed place," announced a melodious voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. As they settled in, Elora noticed something odd. Several delegates from nearby platforms were moving away, creating a noticeable empty space around the humans. Others whispered and gestured in their direction. "Are we doing something wrong?" Darian murmured. Before Elora could respond, the proceedings began. The Vrexian representative, a towering chitinous being with multiple limbs, began listing grievances against the Turalians in a series of clicks and hisses translated through their communication systems. And these transgressions against our sovereign territory cannot stand. The Turalians must withdraw from the Nishka sector immediately or face the consequences." The Turalian delegate, a willowy, plant-like entity with luminescent fronds, responded with equal fervor. "The Vrexians have no historical claim to those systems. Their military build-up threatens our very existence." As the arguments escalated, Elora noticed more and more delegates stealing glances at the human platform. One small avian creature appeared to be trembling. During a brief recess, a Maraxian diplomat, a stocky amphibious being with large, expressive eyes, approached cautiously. "Forgive my directness," the Maraxian said through its translator, "but your species' presence is unsettling many delegates." Elora straightened. "We apologize if we violated some protocol. This is our first—" No, the Maraxian interrupted, blinking rapidly. "It's just your historical records. We've reviewed them as part of your introduction to the Concorde. Your species has an unusual relationship with conflict." Darian frowned. "I don't understand." The Maraxian's voice lowered. "Most species in the Concorde evolve to avoid violence whenever possible. Your kind appears to have evolved through violence." The diplomat glanced nervously at their hands. "And your negotiation techniques are most concerning." As the Maraxian hurried away, Elora and Darian exchanged bewildered looks. They had come to learn, to observe, not to frighten anyone. Little did they know that humanity's casual observation of these negotiations would fundamentally alter the balance of power across the galaxy. The humans hadn't even spoken yet, and already they had become the most terrifying presence in the room. The following day, Elora and Darian were summoned to a private meeting with Nexoldan, the eldest member of the Arbitration Council, a being that resembled a floating collection of crystalline structures interconnected by threads of light. "Thank you for agreeing to this consultation," Nexoldan began, its voice translated into a serene, androgynous tone. "I believe clarification is needed regarding your species' unexpected impact on our proceedings." The meeting chamber was intimate but elegant, with walls that seemed to shift between states of matter. Elora noted that despite the friendliness, security drones hovered discreetly in the corners. "We're confused," Elora admitted. "We've barely said a word since arriving." "Precisely," said Nexolden, its crystalline body refracting light in complex patterns. "Your silence is unnerving." Most species would have immediately attempted to establish their position in the hierarchy through displays of cultural achievement or technological prowess. Darian leaned forward. "We were instructed to observe only." Nexolden's lights pulsed in what might have been the equivalent of a sigh. "Yesterday our archivists completed their analysis of your species' publicly available historical records. The results were troubling." A holographic display materialized between them, showing a timeline of human history. "Your species has engaged in constant warfare throughout your development," Nexolden continued. "Most remarkable is not the frequency, but the diversity of your conflicts. You fight over territory, resources, ideology, religion, sometimes simply over perceived slights." The display showed images from various human conflicts across centuries. In most Concord species, warfare is a rare aberration or a last resort. For humans, it appears to be a developmental stage. You don't simply engage in violence, you study it, perfect it, develop arts of war. Elora felt a chill. "We've also developed extensive diplomatic traditions." "Indeed," Nexolden interrupted. "This is what truly disturbs the Council. Your diplomacy appears inextricably linked to your warfare. You negotiate from positions of strength. You prepare for peace by readying for war." The hologram shifted to show historical peace conferences, military alliances, and nuclear deterrence doctrines. "Most troubling is your concept of speaking softly and carrying a big stick, or your trust but verify approaches. To Concord sensibilities, these are not diplomatic concepts. They are threats concealed beneath courtesy." Darian exchanged a concerned glance with Elora. "We came here in peace. We have no military presence anywhere near this sector." "That is what confuses us most," Nexolden admitted. "Your delegation arrived in a simple transport vessel, without warships or weapons. Yet you sit in silence, observing the Vrexian-Turalian dispute as if assessing weakness." The crystal being's lights dimmed slightly. "Many delegates believe you are the most dangerous entity in the negotiations, precisely because you appear so non-threatening while coming from such a violent history." As Elora struggled to formulate a response that wouldn't further alarm the Council, she realized the profound misunderstanding at play and the unexpected advantage it might provide. The third day of negotiations brought a dramatic shift in the proceedings. The Vrexian and Turalian delegations, previously belligerent and uncompromising, now spoke in measured tones. References to military action had disappeared from their rhetoric. Most notably, both sides frequently glanced toward the human platform, with what could only be described as nervous deference. "I don't understand what's happening," Darian whispered, as they observed a sudden breakthrough in territorial discussions. "They've gone from the brink of war to reasonable compromise in 24 hours. Elora maintained her diplomatic composure, but internally she was piecing together the situation. "I think they're afraid of us, or rather, what we might do if they destabilize this region of space." The realization would have been amusing if it weren't so serious. Humanity, barely spacefaring compared to these ancient civilizations, had accidentally positioned itself as some sort of cosmic boogeyman. During the midday recess, Caliph Muir, a reptilian diplomat representing the Ashdarian syndicate, slithered over to their platform. Unlike most delegates who maintained a cautious distance, Muir approached with calculated confidence. "Fascinating display, ambassadors," Muir said, voice raspy through the translator. "In 30 cycles of diplomatic service, I've never seen the threat of observation work so effectively. "We're not threatening anyone," Elora stated firmly. "Of course not." Moore's scaled lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. "That's what makes it so effective. After your meeting with Nex Olden, word spread about your species' unique evolutionary path. Our history doesn't define our present intentions," Darian insisted. "Indeed." Moore's inner eyelids flickered. "Is it true your species developed nuclear weapons before achieving reliable spaceflight? Or that you once nearly destroyed yourselves in ideological standoffs?" "When?" "Neither human denied these facts," Moore continued. "Most impressive is your species' concept of mutually assured destruction. The Vrexians and Turalians now fear you might apply similar principles to interstellar relations." Elora maintained her diplomatic neutrality. "We're merely here to learn." "Precisely. What terrifies them?" Moore replied. "Your species learns conflict like others learn art. The Vrexians, for all their bluster, evolved from herd herbivores who developed technology to compensate for physical limitations. The Turalians are collective consciousness organisms who find the concept of harming parts of themselves abhorrent." The reptilian diplomat leaned closer. "Neither can comprehend a species that transformed internal conflict into a source of innovation, that weaponized its own self-destructive tendencies into diplomatic leverage." As Moore departed, Elora and Darian faced a moral dilemma. Should they correct these misperceptions or strategically allow them to facilitate peace? Before they could decide, an urgent message arrived from Earth. The United Nations Security Council had been monitoring the situation and recognized the unexpected advantage. Their new instructions were clear: maintain presence, minimal engagement, and let the misconceptions work to humanity's benefit. For the first time in Galactic Concord history, silence had become the most powerful negotiating tactic. The humans hadn't needed to make threats. Their mere existence, informed by a history most species found incomprehensible, was threat enough. A week into the peace conference, humanity's unintentional influence had evolved into something more deliberate. Elora and Darian now moved through the diplomatic circles with careful precision, their every gesture analyzed by anxious alien observers. "Ambassador Voss," called out Jirix Tal, the towering Vrexian delegate, intercepting Elora as she made her way to the morning session. "A moment of your time." Elora paused, maintaining the measured expression that had become her trademark. "Of course, Delegate Tal." The massive insectoid being lowered its voice, mandibles clicking softly. "Our intelligence services have been studying your Earth's military history extensively. Your human Sun Tzu? His concepts are particularly troubling." "The art of war is over 2,000 years old," Elora replied calmly. "Many consider it philosophical rather than practical." "A philosophy of deception and indirect approach," Tal clicked. "Your entire delegation's behavior mirrors this strategy perfectly. You watch, you wait, you reveal nothing." Elora simply smiled, politely, which seemed to unnerve the Vrexian further. "The Vrexian Empire wishes to extend an offer of friendship," Tal continued. "We would be interested in cultural exchange programs. Purely civilian, of course." "I'll convey your interest to my government," Elora responded neutrally. Not 30 minutes later, the Turalian representative, Lis Damar, cornered Darian with a similar overture. The plant-like being's luminescent fronds pulsed with nervous energy. "The collective has abundant resources we could share," Lis Damar's melodic voice projected. "Particularly rare minerals useful for starship construction, as a gesture of goodwill, with no expectations." Back on their private shuttle that evening, Elora and Darian compared notes. "They're trying to bribe us into taking sides," Darian observed. "Or at least into not opposing them," Elora nodded, reviewing the day's diplomatic recordings. The fascinating thing is that our negotiating position only grows stronger with our continued neutrality. Earth's instructions are perfect. Minimal engagement is being interpreted as supreme confidence. A communication from Admiral Reza Okafor, humanity's military liaison to the diplomatic mission, appeared on their secure channel. Interesting developments, the Admiral began. Our intelligence suggests both the Vrexians and Turalians have dramatically reduced their military deployments near the disputed systems. Neither wants to appear aggressive while you're watching. Elora frowned. We need to be careful. This misconception has been useful, but misleading them indefinitely is both unethical and unsustainable, Darian finished. Eventually they'll learn more about us. They'll discover that humanity is deeply divided, that our military capabilities are primitive, compared to theirs, that our diplomatic corps is still figuring out interstellar protocol. Admiral Okafor's expression remained serious. True, but by then, the peace treaty may already be signed. Sometimes perception creates its own reality. The UN Security Council believes we should maintain this approach for the duration of the conference. As they debated the ethics of their accidental strategy, neither human noticed the small surveillance probe hovering outside their shuttle's viewport, or that their candid conversation was being transmitted directly to the chambers of the arbitration. Council, on the 15th day of negotiations, everything changed. Elora and Darian arrived at the conquered chamber to find the normal proceedings suspended. All platforms were oriented toward the center, where Nexoldan and the other 4 members of the Arbitration Council hovered in formal arrangement. The human delegation will approach the central platform, announced the melodious voice of the chamber. Elora and Darian exchanged alarmed glances as their platform detached and floated toward the center of the sphere. The chamber fell into complete silence. Representatives of Earth, Nexoldan began, crystal structures glimmering. It has come to our attention that your influence on these proceedings has been based on a significant misunderstanding. A cold sensation settled in Elora's stomach. Somehow, their private discussions had been compromised. Our surveillance systems recorded your candid assessment of the situation, continued Prelvax, the gaseous cloud being who served as the Council's security administrator. You acknowledged exploiting misconceptions about your species for diplomatic advantage. Murmurs spread through the chamber as delegates processed this information. The Vrexian and Turalian representatives appeared particularly agitated. We did not create these misconceptions, Elora responded firmly. We simply did not correct every assumption made about us. A distinction without difference, rumbled Galmek, the mountainous silicon-based council member. You permitted fear to drive these negotiations, Darian stepped forward. With respect, council members, we came here as observers to a dispute that had nothing to do with humanity. The fear was not our creation. It stemmed from how other species interpreted our history. A tense silence followed before NX Olden spoke again. What the Council finds most surprising is not your strategic silence, but what our surveillance revealed about humanity's true nature. The central holographic display activated, showing footage from Earth, not of wars or weapons, but of humanitarian missions, international cooperation, scientific endeavors, and cultural celebrations. Your species is indeed violent by concord. Standards, Nenix Olden acknowledged, but you are also remarkably cooperative. You form alliances, build coalitions, and often place collective welfare above individual gain, qualities that, ironically, many Concord members struggle to maintain. The arbiter Lisa Zahn, a luminous energy being, moved forward. Most telling was your private debate about the ethics of allowing misconceptions to continue. You questioned whether peace achieved through fear was truly sustainable. The fifth, Council member Doros Khan, a being composed of interlocking mechanical parts whose species had long ago transferred their consciousness into artificial forms, spoke last. The Arbitration Council has reached a unanimous decision. Humanity will no longer serve as observers to these proceedings. Elora felt a wave of disappointment. Their first diplomatic mission failed so dramatically. Instead, Doros Khan continued, we invite the human delegation to join the mediation team as full participants. The final days of the Galactic Concord's peace conference unfolded in ways none could have predicted. With humanity now serving on the mediation team, the dynamics shifted dramatically. Instead of being feared as potential threats, Elora and Darian found themselves valued for the very paradox that defined their species. Your proposal is unacceptable, chittered the Rexian delegate during a particularly tense negotiation over the Nishka sector. We cannot surrender our security interests based on Turalian promises. In previous sessions, such statements would have triggered immediate escalation. Now, Elora leaned forward. On Earth, we have a concept called trust but verify, she explained. Rather than seeing verification as an insult, we frame it as a path to building confidence between parties. The chamber grew quiet as she continued. What if autonomous monitoring stations, operated by neutral Concord members, were established throughout the disputed region? Neither side would need to trust the other's word. Both could verify compliance independently. The Vrexian's antennae twitched thoughtfully. The Turalian's fronds shifted from anxious red to contemplative blue. In private consultation afterward, NX Olden's crystalline form shimmered with what appeared to be amusement. Fascinating. You proposed a solution based on mutual distrust, yet somehow made it feel collaborative. Humans have millennia of experience turning adversaries into partners, Darian replied. Often because we had no choice but to find common ground after conflict. This is why the Council finds your species so remarkable, Nixolden observed. You are simultaneously the most and least suited for diplomatic work. Your history of violence gives you insights other species lack, while your capacity for cooperation prevents that violence from defining you entirely. On the final day, as the treaty was prepared for signing, Ambassador Voss was invited to address the full assembly, an unprecedented honor for a species so new to the Concord. Elora stood on the central platform, facing the gathered representatives of thousands of worlds. The fear that had initially greeted humanity's arrival had transformed into something more complex. Respect mingled with cautious curiosity. Distinguished delegates, she began. When we arrived at this conference, many viewed humanity with alarm. Our history, seen through your eyes, painted us as dangerous aberrations, creatures who transformed violence into art and confrontation into strategy. She paused, looking around the chamber. You weren't entirely wrong. Humanity's path has been marked by conflict, but what defines us is not our capacity for violence. It's our persistent search for alternatives to it. The chamber remained silent. As she continued, we fight, yes, but we also reconcile. We divide, then reunite. We've stood on the precipice of self-destruction multiple times, yet always pulled back, always found another way forward. The peace agreement you signed today isn't valuable because it's perfect. It's valuable because it represents a choice to see beyond immediate interests toward mutual benefit. That choice, the decision to cooperate despite differences, is the most human thing in this room. As the Vrexian and Turalian delegates approached to sign the treaty, something unprecedented occurred. Rather than maintaining traditional diplomatic distance, they requested the human ambassador join them at the signing table. Not as mediator, but as witness and guarantor. When asked why, the Vrexian delegate clicked thoughtfully before responding, because humans understand the cost of failed diplomacy better than any species present. The treaty, soon to be known across the galaxy as the Human Accord, established not just peace between two antagonistic powers, but a new framework for conflict resolution throughout conquered space. In the following months, humanity would receive formal membership in the Galactic Concord, not as a minor new addition, but as a specially designated diplomatic authority. Requests for human mediators flooded in from across the galaxy. They had arrived as observers and accidental intimidators. They departed as something far more valuable, a species whose greatest strength lay not in their capacity for war, but in their hard-won understanding of peace. As their shuttle departed the Concord station, Elora gazed back at the magnificent, spherical structure. "Do you think they'll ever stop being afraid of us?" she asked Darian. He smiled, watching as dozens of diplomatic vessels prepared to escort them home, not as guards, but as honored companions. Perhaps fear isn't the right word anymore. I think they're simply in awe of a species that faced its own violent nature and chose to transform it into something better, a species, Elora added quietly, that turned the art of war into the craft of peace.